First of all, how you doing today, man?
All right, I guess.
All right.
Some good, some bad.
I feel you, man. It's been like a year. I posted that other video, and my friends were like, "Dude, what's wrong with you, bro? You gotta come hard at this atheist." But obviously, that's just not my usual tactics because I like to, you know, be more understanding. Um, but that was a conversation about a year ago, and they thought that just happened. Um, but yeah, man. So I kind of wanted to just give like an opening, kind of like last time. Maybe take maybe like 5 to 10 minutes, or if that's as long as it takes, just to kind of open up the position that we want to address. Because I am talking about the cosmological argument, but I'm gonna get more, I guess, a little more philosophical, and then you can speak on that. And then I was thinking maybe just open into a conversation after that, if that's cool.
Sure.
All right, cool. So, did you want to? Well, I guess I should go first because glad to have you here. To have this conversation again. Um, the problem with most Christians, I think, or most people that believe in God, is that we don't want to take the time to understand that each atheist is different. So then we enter the conversation the wrong way. But looking at atheists kind of like robots and not people, it's kind of a type of mindset there that keeps us from understanding. Um, and
Well, I am
I
a
was
robot, to be fair. So
You said you are a robot.
yeah, I am a
Well,
robot. It's
well,
legit.
then the Christians are right. Then debate's over. Honestly. So I watched a lot of the like a lot of the debates and stuff that you've had, and I like the way that you explain things. I obviously disagree with a lot of it, but there's like I said last time, there's like an honesty that you have that I kind of wish more Christians had. So, and I don't know, I'm just very analytical when it comes to this. So it kind of bothers me when it's like, dude, these are good questions to think about. Um, but I just feel like the atheist is missing one thing, and that's like a
Evidence?
consideration. You said what?
Oh, evidence.
The atheist is missing one thing. Yeah. Um, so and it's funny, like I don't even think the evidence is the thing that puts the lid on the cap, that puts the lid on the bottle, whatever that caps it. But it's the thing that I feel very strongly that the spirit is telling me. I'm just playing. Um, is a consideration for a relationship with whoever is up there. I know people may have. You may say that people have considered that before. I would just strongly, um, I would say, disagree with the lengths they were willing to go to get that relationship. And I think that is
That's
the big.
actually a really common thing that Christians say, but it seems like that's more of a defense mechanism than an actual consideration. Because most atheists were Christians, and especially in America, and based on the evidence, based on the statistics, it's more rational to conclude that the vast majority of those atheists were driven to try to find a relationship with God, even more so than most Christians are. Most atheists do more research into the Bible, do more prayer, do more trying to get God to answer and failing than Christians do. And that's why they leave the faith. And so it's a common misconception that Christians have that atheists just didn't have enough faith or weren't trying enough in a relationship. That's totally false. Like all of the studies show that was false. Um, it's mostly just a defense mechanism that helps protect someone's belief to try to justify why God wouldn't, or why they wouldn't be able to find God if God is really there. Oh, well, they just didn't try hard enough. And so it's a common thing to try to place blame on the intentions or motivations of the other group rather than thinking that they genuinely did the research and didn't find an answer. Because if you believe there's no all-powerful God there, well, then of course he's supposed to reach out, and if you didn't, that would be like a failure on his part. And so it's a common thing that many religious people believe that you didn't try hard enough as an atheist, but it's just false, demonstrably false. The people in the atheist community, based on every study, have tried harder to find relationship with a God than the vast majority of Christians ever have.
Um, I can't really agree with that because the majority of people are they believe in something. So that's very hard to believe with the because most people on the planet are not atheists.
Right, but which group spent the most time trying to build a relationship? Which ones are the ones that read the Bible more? So there's tons and tons of studies that show who knows more about the Bible, Christians or atheists. Atheists win every time because they read the Bible over and over again. They genuinely saw it. They genuinely prayed and tried to build a relationship and failed. Um, Whereas Christians usually are born into it, and so they naturally have this inclination that they believe, and so they don't do as much detailed research and put in as much effort to try to find a relationship. They just naturally think they have it, and so they don't have to do as much reading and as much studying as the atheists do to try to combat that. Like Bart Ehrman is a really great example. He was a Christian who started to research into the manuscripts, the Old Testament manuscripts, to try to justify his belief in a God. And then from the research, he deconverted to atheism because the evidence just doesn't indicate that. And that's what happens to most scientists, most philosophers, most of the people who are the experts in the field, who really do the research, who really do search, turn away from God, not towards him. And so again, it's mostly the case that when Christians believe that atheists didn't do the work or didn't have enough of a desire for relationship, that's mostly just a defense mechanism to protect their own belief. And it's all of the studies show that's false. All of the studies that have ever been done on atheists and leaving faith have shown they've put in more effort to try to find a relationship than most Christians do.
But see, I don't think it's an evidence problem. I think it's more of a philosophical thing, like the way that we think about it. Because if you line up all the evidence, you can go so far that you begin to doubt your own existence. So it has nothing to do with evidence. You see what I'm saying? Like evidence is more of a what puts the lid on the cap. So they can study as much as they want, but the majority of Christians that have not studied as much as the atheist go in it with a different mindset. So that's why they come out with God, because that consideration for the relationship is stronger than the consideration for evidence. Because at some point, the evidence is not going to prove it, because you're going to get to the place where you can be so skeptic that nothing is true to you. There are people that actually say there's an interesting form of nothing. The only difference is I would call that interesting form of nothing the God that we can't see that caused this to be. So you can't see the mind, but when you rely on evidence, I would argue that the evidence is more probable for a mind. But I just wanted to go in just a little bit with my position, and just to break it down a little more, because I think you might find it interesting. You probably have you've heard some stuff before about, like, I've seen some of the debates that you've had with some people, just to make sure that I didn't waste time and bring up a, a bunch of stuff that I already know your position on. Um, so there are two views that could that I find could work for the existence of the universe. One, nature, without a mind and a sort of proclivity to create things with proper functions that bring some sense of objective morality. Two, a person who is unreasonably powerful in ways that go against what people are capable of, infinitely existing unlike any human on earth, and we don't have evidence of any person doing that. So these two views have a problem. First of all, the person, no one has ever had that type of power. And why would we assume that this God loves us when there are so many things that we disagree with about him, that he does that we consider to be evil? And I mean, I'm not happy about some of the things that he allows or the way he set it up either. But I'm willing to admit that. The only thing that has ever been witnessed to form into things are natural causes, right? So the problem with nature bringing things into existence, we don't have any evidence of nature having proclivities to um, to want to bring things for whatever reason without a mind, uh, and also bringing about objective morality. There's no way, in my view, that if you prove, and I can go back into these, if you can prove objective morality, then that would be very similar to proving the existence of God because there's no natural evidence. All you can do is come up with a system that may work for everybody, but there's no evidence of actual. And I know I'm gonna try to get through it so you can respond because I know you got a lot to say. Um, the only thing that would work is is some mind. If you could imagine a mind with nature combined, that would be God. I say God, but if you could imagine like this invisible gas that exists everywhere in the universe that caused everything to exist. And that's why I believe that our positions are, in my opinion, kind of closer because when I hear the atheists talk about how the universe came to be, I'm like, some of the definitions, some of the explanations sound like, man, that sounds like God because when they describe an interesting form of nothing, I'm like, that's kind of it sounds like a really good explanation except for the nothing part, but it's something that we can't see. So I feel like that's why I would agree kind of with the interesting form of nothing. And then I would just close with let me see, whatever the cause, prove it. Yeah, yeah, whatever the cause is for us coming to an existence, I would say that it would have to be something that you would have to, like, if you think about an anime show, you would have to put your hands on these things. Like, it's you would have to put your hands on the evidence, and it's not something that you can see. It's something that you have to grab hold of. Um, like if you would imagine like an anime show, and I feel like that is the only way that you can get absolute certainty. Obviously, the research helps, and the research in the evidence it leans you more toward. But I've heard people break down the 5 arguments for the existence of God, and the only problem I have with that, those things have been tried over and over and over again. But the skepticism, it's just so easy to doubt that. But I'm just gonna, I guess I'll just bring up little things here and there because um, that's the majority. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. One more thing. Um, mm, no, that's all right. That'll come up later. I don't want to put too much on the table. Yeah. So that's where I stand with this.
All right. So I didn't really understand most of your argument there. So morality, I believe in objective morality. Most philosophers believe in objective morality. Most philosophers are atheists. You don't need a God for objective morality. God does nothing. It makes objective morality worse. It makes it subjective. So there's lots of ways to have natural objective morality. One of them is called moral naturalism. Just Google that, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, entire fields of moral naturalism without any God. I don't know why you would think you would need a God for objective morality. There's no reason to think that. Gravity is objective. You don't, if gravity is a law of nature and it can be objective, morality can be a law of nature and it can be objective. You don't need a God for that. You don't need choices to create things into the universe. Quantum mechanics can do that. There's no evidence choices can exist outside of space-time. There's tons of evidence that quantum mechanics can exist outside of space-time. So to think a choice did anything is, there's no evidence to support that whatsoever. There's tons of evidence to think that nature can do it. And there's no evidence to think a mind can do it, which is why the consensus in physics is that nature did it, not a mind did it. So I don't understand why you think a conscious entity would be a better explanation of anything in the universe, because it's just not indicated by any of the evidence. Like, evidence is things that we can differentiate between, is it in our imagination or does it exist outside of our imagination? All of the properties of quantum mechanics are things that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. They can, the Casimir effect, double slit experiment, entanglement, we can demonstrate these things. We can demonstrate the parts of what make these things, and they exist. And we can show that they exist because we can say, if these things exist, here's a test we can do, and here's the result we're going to get. And we get it right every time. We're with a high degree of certainty. And so we can show that all those things exist independent of our imagination. None of the properties of God can be shown to exist independent of our imagination. None of them. No omnipotence, omnibenevolence, omniscience, outside of space-time minds. None of that. None of that has been shown to exist. And so the rational conclusion is that the things that we can show that exist are a better explanation of what we see than things that we can't show exist. And going based off things that we can't show exist is just making stuff up, essentially, like saying leprechauns did it. We can't demonstrate leprechauns exist. You could believe leprechauns did it. That's fine. I don't really care what anybody believes. But the evidence is only allowed to indicate the things that we can demonstrate exist independent of our imagination. And God is not among those things. God is in the leprechauns, unicorns, fairies, Santa Claus case. Quantum physics is in the things that we can demonstrate exist case. And so if we're trying to say which one's a better explanation of everything we see in reality, including morality, consciousness, the quantum physics is the better explanation because we can demonstrate it actually exists.
So, let's see. You said something about morality. Um, Let me see. I'll just touch on. One second, sorry. I'll just touch on the. What was the thing you just said about the not morality? Oh, okay. Yeah. So I would believe that I would believe that a leprechaun caused the universe to exist. Might sound insane, but I would believe that a leprechaun caused the universe to exist before I would believe that nature did it, because what you don't have evidence for is nature having proclivities for some reason to even want to have some type of desire, or however you explain it, to cause us to exist. There's no evidence for that, and there's no way you can find evidence for that or objective morality
Wait. I don't
because
understand. I don't understand. Like, when you say proclivities, like, there's no evidence you need proclivities to do anything. Proclivities are not a thing that are required for the origin of the universe. What's required is physics. Like, quantum fluctuations can create differentiation between matter and antimatter, and that can create the Big Bang, which then creates all the stuff we see around us. Where did you get this idea that you need proclivities or desires for anything prior to a million years ago?
so so the fact that we exist and okay, so you're telling me that you believe that this is more the way that we came about is more random nature. Okay.
Determined nature. It's all determined for the most
So,
part.
see, that's what I'm saying. You say stuff like determined. So I'm like, that confuses me. What do you mean by determined? Who determined it or what determined it? Just what it's
The
like it
laws of
sounds like
physics.
nature wanted to do this. The
No,
way
like
that you say it. I'm just
gravity doesn't want rocks to fall. Rocks are determined to fall because that's how gravity operates. There's no choice
I'm
there.
sorry. You you say determined and that just it's almost like you sound like, I mean, I'm not trying to like be not trying to troll or anything, but it sounds like you believe in God, but just the way that you speak, it's like, how can you say that anything is determined without a God? Because maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying by determined. Because determined sounds like someone determined this to be this. So I don't know how nature can determine things.
So determine and determined are two different things. Determine is like a mental process. Determined just means that one
A
process
mental
necessarily
process.
follows
Oh,
determine
sorry,
to
sorry.
determine something.
Yeah.
Determined with the D at the end means that it's a necessary antecedent result. So like if you have one domino and it falls and it hits the next domino and that falls and hits the next domino, none of the dominoes are determining anything. They're not deciding anything. They are determined to fall because of the way the laws of physics work. There's no choice, there's no decisions. It is because of the laws of physics.
I've just never heard these words explained this way. I mean, maybe it's the definition, so maybe I'm tripping. Um, so let me see. So you're saying that okay, we just have I guess I just have a misunderstanding of that definition. So I'm trying to understand, like, because I wouldn't use it that way. So now I'm trying to understand like what that even, the dominoes, just, I mean, is there like a synonym that you could use to make that make sense? The
Uh,
dominoes were determined to fall. I
yeah,
don't usually speak like that. So, well, maybe the dominoes just are bound to fall. Maybe it's something like that, I guess.
sure.
Okay. As when I say
To
determined,
determine,
are
it
you
just means
it just sounds
determine
like a
just means
person
there
thing.
is no, has nothing to do with the person. In philosophy, it has nothing to do with the person. In science, it has nothing to do with the person. The word determined has nothing to do with personhood whatsoever in any of the scientific fields. It's specifically just that the initial starting conditions of the system will necessitate this outcome. That's all it means. Determined just means so. Necessary starting conditions, this outcome. That's it. No
Okay,
mind
gotcha.
involved, no choices involved. So, like, if the laws of physics start off with these conditions, gravity or whatever, then rocks are determined to fall. There is no choice involved.
Okay, I got you. I just want to make sure I understand before I like, jump on a whole nother path, and that we're not even understanding each other. So I had to make sure of that. So, um, now I don't want to turn this into a morality debate, but I would just say it sounds more like I don't believe that there's no way that morality can exist without a God, because what you have is a system that you have created, which sounds a lot like how the atheist views us with God. Um,
We didn't create objective morality means it's not created by humans. That's what it
or
means. It means it
discovered,
exists. Yeah, we discovered it, sure.
but no one has discovered that. It's
So
so if
so like it could still be out there. Like it could be a law of nature, like gravity. We just haven't discovered it yet, and it's objective, and you don't need a god for that.
well, I mean, I would argue that no one is going to be able to find out, to discover objective morality without God. I don't think that that's not even possible at
Based
this
on
point.
what? What evidence do you have of that? Because there's no evidence to indicate that. All the evidence in the experts in the field think you're wrong. All of the philosophical arguments think you're wrong. All of the indications of moral intuition, moral progress say you're wrong. So what is your basis to conclude that? Because it seems like you're just asserting it based on your feelings. You feel God is important, and you feel based on your worldview that objective morality is tied to God. Therefore, you feel it's impossible to discover it. But that's like if I said, I think a magic leprechaun knocked over my cup, and I think you're never going to find the other cause that it could be. It's like, well, it's a nice feeling, but what's your evidence to indicate this is the case? Because again, the whole field it disagrees with you. So why do you think that is the case?
because the whole field disagrees with me and they haven't found it yet. For this long, I would feel like they would be able to have found it. But you're
Well,
right.
you've never found it. So no Christians have ever found it. No theists have ever found it. No one's found it. So it's an undiscovered thing, which means to say that scientists haven't found it, you also haven't found it. There's no evidence either way, one right now, which means it doesn't indicate your conclusion any more than it indicates the other conclusions. So this is it's a common argument called an argument from ignorance, where you say that uh, they haven't found it, therefore I'm right. Well, it doesn't work that way. The way evidence works is you have to have you have to have found it. You need positive evidence for your conclusion. And the fact that the other worldview doesn't have evidence of their conclusion isn't evidence of your conclusion. You would need to discover it. So you can't just say the scientists haven't discovered it. You would need to discover it.
Well, yeah, that's what my position would be about God. So I wouldn't use that same argument. Um, my point in saying that they haven't, it's like 5 minutes. Okay, my point in saying that they haven't discovered it, it was something that I was thinking about. Um, when you say no, 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 my argument is not just solely that because they haven't found it yet, that there's no proof. The reason, okay, I don't think it makes sense. It's not because it doesn't fit with my worldview. It doesn't make sense that objective. I mean, to think about what objective morality actually is, like, like a, it's almost like taking something that exists in the mind and trying to make that into something natural, some natural element or something. I've never have we ever found anything like, which is the same argument, but um it just, objective morality is like a an objective system that exists, something like, to say that, okay, it's very weird to find I shouldn't steal a bag of chips, like that being objective, a part of objective morality, and saying that that's something that's natural, that we could find objective evidence of something like that being wrong. Like, that's, I don't
So,
know, maybe we view objective morality differently, but I don't understand how you could find natural evidence of something being right or wrong.
so there's a couple things there. One, everything a part of our mind is subjective. So if you think morality is just a part of a mind, then it's by definition not objective. It's subjective, contingent on the mind. For it to be objective, it has to be independent of the mind. That's why God-based morality isn't objective. This is why it's one of the worst not accepted models in academic philosophy, because it's not objective.
Unless he's
Um,
real, then it
no,
is
he'd still be
objective.
it would still be subjective
If
because it's
he's
contingent on
real,
his mind. Yep.
if he's real and he brought I mean, a system where you can think about any show where
Wait. What does subjective mean?
subjective is more of like opinion morality, right?
Well, it's contingent on a mind, intuitions, or feelings of a subject.
Yeah.
God is a subject. Like, I'm not God, you're not God. God is a different person, right? He's a subject. He is an individual who isn't us.
Okay, this is okay, so
Because
it's
objective means
subjective
independent of all
to God.
individuals.
Okay.
No, God is a subject. So God is a subject. He is an individual. Like, all individuals are subjects.
Okay, but okay. If he made the
It
natural
doesn't
ele
matter. It doesn't matter
No, no, no.
what he
It's
made. So
going,
it's
I'm
relevant.
talking about with your argument. I'm connecting it to yours.
My argument is just the definition of subjective is dependent on a mind, intuitions, feelings, opinions
Yeah,
of
but
anyone. I don't care what that person is. I don't care what that person did. I don't care where they are in the universe. Makes no difference. If it's contingent on a mind, it is by definition subjective. Objective means not contingent on a mind, any mind of any level, anywhere.
okay, so objective morality could, or we objective morality um exists, right?
Yep.
So Is it is it impossible for whatever evidence we discover that proves objective morality that God could have created that?
Uh,
Because for
if
you to
it's
say no, that would
contingent,
be a strong claim to make. I don't know how you could prove that.
well, if it's contingent on God's mind, then it's by definition subjective.
But then objective morality wouldn't exist anymore if God brought that. How could I
Right.
don't even
If
understand how you could.
it's contingent on his opinions, then it's not objective. It's subjective.
Like when people say, what evidence would you need to believe in God? Like
Novel
what?
testable predictions.
Well, that's not the question I was asking, but
So if you're going to ask me, like, what evidence would I require that objective morality was created by God or something like that? That's a contradiction. That'd be like asking me, what evidence do I need that Bob is a married bachelor? Well, that doesn't make any sense. You can't have evidence that Bob is both married and a bachelor. That's a contradiction. So for objective morality to be true, it can't be made by a mind. Can't be made by a mind. It has to be true independent of a mind. So there are possible models that of a God-based objective morality. Like if morality is a part of God's nature and he didn't choose it, his mind has nothing to do with it, he doesn't get an opinion on it, then it can be objective and there can be a God-based objective morality. But if it's based on his mind and his opinions, then it can't be objective by definition.
okay. So in the Bible, I know I'm not like doing circular arguments, but just a way to explain what I actually believe, and it lines up with the Bible. The Bible actually says that God is truth. So therefore God would be objective morality in that sense. So he would be a different type of entity. It'd be like objective morality with a mind. And then I know if I bring the mind up, then it'll be like, oh, that's a contradiction, right?
If it's dependent on the mind, it's by definition subjective. Also, God as truth doesn't make sense. Truth is correspondence to reality. Truth doesn't exist. It's a description of sentences. So, like if you say the table is true, it doesn't make any sense to say the table is true. It's complete gibberish. But you can say the table exists, and that sentence is true. The table exists. The sentence is true. Truth is a property of sentences. It's a thing of language. If the language represents reality accurately, an object can't be truth. That doesn't make any sense. It's just something like it's one of those arguments that like my dad is bigger than your dad kind of a thing where it's a cool word, people like the word and so they attribute it to their favorite deity even if it makes sense or not. There's no such thing as God is truth, just like there's no such thing as table is truth. The table is not truth. The table is not true.
Well,
The
comparing a
sentence
table to like a supernatural being is
makes no difference. This applies to all existing objects. Any object that exists is not truth. Any object that exists is not true. The sentence, this object exists, can be true, but the object has no truth in it. There's no truth in the object. It's not true. The sentences that describe the object can be true. This applies to God and everything, and me and you. I am not true. You are not true. It is true that you exist because that sentence is the thing that holds the truth. Truth is not a property of existing things.
but see the way that God describes himself, he describes himself as the word, and the word wouldn't make sense either unless you understand what it means. So when he says I am truth, when you build a uh it's like when you read the Bible and you get to know the people in the Bible like you would on a show. It's a little different than just grammatically putting together the words, because obviously I know that doesn't make sense. But it's not just saying that he is the truth. It's saying that everything he brings about into reality, every truth was brought about by him. And you can only get truth by having a relationship with him. That's what that means. So I get what you're saying though, but it's not.
Well, there's two possibilities here. One is that there is some esoteric meaning of these words that ties into the metaphysical nature of reality that nobody understands. Two, this was written by a bunch of goat herders who didn't understand reality. Now, we would need evidence one way or the other. Now, we have lots and lots of evidence that this was just written by a bunch of goat herders and they had no idea what they were talking about because most of the things in the Bible describing reality is just wrong. You have to try to ambiguate it, try and make it fit the things science discovers. So that seems to be a more rational interpretation than trying to idolize the Bible and thinking it's mystical and has some absolute truths of the universe to it. And so when it says God is the word, that this somehow corresponds to the essence of metaphysical reality, probably not. That doesn't seem to be a rational interpretation. That seems to be a biased interpretation because you want it to be true. You believe it. And so you're trying to look at these words and believe that they have some ultimate meaning in them that corresponds to reality. But that's not the way you should approach anything. You should say, okay, what's the evidence of the two possibilities written by goat herders who didn't understand the universe versus actual correspondence to metaphysical reality? What would we expect, or what kind of evidence could we show that could indicate one or the other?
So you would assume that the goat herders were writing the Bible and they thought that this object of God is actually truth in the sense that a, a table is true? You think that's what they meant to write?
No, I think they didn't understand reality. They didn't understand epistemology. They didn't understand truth or the how the universe works. They understood nothing. But they have words that mean something to them. Words that have emotional power behind them. Kind of like racist or sexist in our society today. There are words that have positive and negative connotations. Truth is one of the ones that has positive correlations, kind of like billionaire. It's a richness one. And so if they had words like billionaire or some supremely wealthy kind of a thing, they would have attributed that word to God because any words that they think are positively associated with some kind of emotion, they would say, well, God is the maximum of whatever this is. Just like a little kid describing his dad's going to say, my dad is the greatest. And that's all that were. All these words about God being the word, God being truth, God being logos. That's just them being little kids saying, my dad is the greatest. And they're just replacing greatest with their own favorite words. There's no evidence to support this. It's just, they're just making stuff up. And so what we want isn't their interpretation of these big words that mean that have significance to them and then applying these words to the God we want is evidence that it's true. It's a claim. God is truth or whatever. It's fine. You can make whatever claims you want. But we need is evidence that it's the case that this is the true, not just assertions that it's true.
Well, yeah, I wouldn't try to prove that, I wouldn't use that verse to try to prove that God is true. Um, I was just explaining that God describes himself in mysterious ways. Um, so I I guess I'll further it to say I don't see how. Okay, I think what people do is they say, well, we're using God of the Gaps argument, but then they just, I guess you would say that Christians are more too sure themselves about what they believe. But then the atheist is critically thinking about these things and taking a more accurate approach to finding truth. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I'm using some weird words, but I feel like you get the
Well,
basis
I
of what I'm
think
saying.
I think the way I would phrase it is I don't think it matters what atheists and theists are doing. I don't think it matters. What matters is who has evidence. I don't care what their intentions are. I don't care what they're trying to do. I don't care what their methods are. What matters is who has evidence. Like saying there's some like innate bias doesn't help either side. It's just irrelevant. Just what's the evidence indicate? That's all we care about.
I think it's very relevant because it causes you to see the evidence a certain way. Because we bring up what we say is evidence, and then the atheist doesn't believe it because they have they're primed by their experience, whether that was some church heard or something they read in the Bible that they didn't understand. Maybe it was something in the Bible that was actually messed up, and they were like, "Wow, God allowed that," and it could still be true. But then they have bias that causes them to further that belief that a God doesn't exist.
Well,
So
again, I
that's
think
why I
this is
say it
a
matters.
I think this is a Christian, again, misunderstanding of how evidence works. There's no bias there. The bias is irrelevant. The reason physicists don't attribute God has nothing to do with bias. Is because God doesn't make novel predictions in the field. That's it. The reason biologists don't apply to God is because he doesn't make predictions in the field. There's no bias there. Bias is irrelevant. Like if I was biased against gravity, rocks would still fall. Bias makes zero difference to reality. None. And so if you had real evidence, like novel predictions, which is the standard used in all fields of science, bias makes no difference. Bias is never going to stop anything. So all scientists have a bias that they want their model to be correct, and they want all of the other scientists' models to be wrong. So when Einstein came along and he published general and special relativity, every single scientist was biased against his model. Every one of them. They don't want him to be right. They want them to be right. But his model made novel predictions about the curvature of light around the sun, about the perihelion of Mercury, and he got it right. And so even though every single one of them was 100% biased against Einstein, the evidence proved him right. Bias makes no difference. Bias is an excuse theists use to deny the fact that the evidence doesn't indicate their conclusion. So we can prove certain things are not evidence. Like if you see a unicorn and you say, is that evidence that unicorns actually exist? We can be like, no, we can prove that is not evidence unicorns actually exist because we know of delusions, illusions, misconceptions, hallucinations. We know these things exist. We know these things are very common. And so if you say you saw a unicorn, it's not evidence a unicorn exists. It's evidence you had a delusion. And so we can prove your personal testimony is not evidence of unicorns. And for the same reason, it's not evidence of God either. And so there are certain kinds of things which are claimed to be evidence and have been claimed to be evidence for thousands of years that we have proven are not evidence. And we name these fallacies. So like appeal to authority, bandwagon fallacy, anchoring bias, type 1 and type 2 errors. We know that the human brain likes these things and it attributes truth to these things, but they have been proven are not evidence. These are zero evidence. They do not work. And so when someone claims that, when they bring an anchoring bias fallacy and say, oh, look, here's evidence of my conclusion. And we're like, no, we can prove that wrong. That's an anchoring bias fallacy. And they say, oh, well, you're just being biased. Like, no, there's no bias there. We've literally proven that is not evidence. We can prove that is not evidence. And so the reason every scientific field does not accept God isn't bias. It's because it's been proven to not be evidence. The thing you're using has been proven to fail, which is why it's not accepted in the field as a justified reason to do anything. And so there's two possibilities. Either it's one, an irrational rejection of some kind of actual evidence, or two, a kind of evidence that we have historically proven does not work. And so you have to try to assess which one of these is the case. And so give me one of the examples of things that Christians say are evidence that atheists will say is not, that you think is just biased.
The fine-tuning in the universe.
Okay, so the fine-tuning is the fact that if we change any of the physical constants even slightly, life wouldn't be possible.
Yeah.
Now, there's three possibilities there. One is that all of that's determined by some other force we haven't discovered yet. Two, it's random chance. Or three, design. Like those are the three options. And so why do you think this is evidence of design more so than the other two options?
Because the other two have not been discovered yet. So I lean more towards where the evidence leads.
When did we discover design?
You said some unknown thing.
Right. When did we discover that it was designed?
Okay, well, that's where it leads more into the relationship that you have with God. Because
wait. So right there, that's perfect. So
there's no That's what I say. Objective evidence doesn't.
Well, no. This was leading back to my
100%,
point.
yeah.
Well, it can't confirm it with 0%. It's zero. It's nothing. So you said that the reason you think it's design is because of your personal experience, essentially.
I do feel like that's bias, though. Yeah.
Right. That is a bias. That's true. And so the fact that you have a personal experience and you have this relationship with God, and that leans you towards.
Sounds like you're being biased, but yeah.
Well, how is that bias? So I'm saying we need evidence. So I agree, fine-tuning is a phenomenon. It exists. There are three possible explanations determined by like a fine structure constant, random chance, or design. And There is zero evidence for design. None. Zero.
Zero
You have a
evidence for
personal
design.
relationship, and because you have a personal relationship, you like to indicate design, but the personal relationship is just like you saying you saw a
Well,
unicorn.
no, I'm
We
not
know that's not
objectively using
evidence.
that though.
What?
I was saying that is a necessary element to know, but that's not the evidence. I wouldn't objectively like I wouldn't say that that's objective evidence at all. That is subjective evidence for sure. I can't prove
Well,
anything with my relationship. So I wasn't saying that. I wasn't
okay, so my
using my relationship to prove it. Is what I'm
okay,
saying.
so my question was is what is an example of evidence that you think atheists are dismissing based on bias rather than it being a provably false argument? And you said the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah.
There is nothing in physics that indicates fine-tuning is a result of design. Nothing. Nobody in physics thinks that. Is not in any papers. Zero people have any published academic papers on that. Doesn't happen. There's tons of it on the multiverse. There's tons of it on string theory. There's tons of it on the fine structure constant. Nothing on design. There is nothing in physics that indicates design. And so what the question is what justification do you think you have that fine tuning indicates design that isn't a debunked fallacious argument that we can prove does not work?
Okay. So the fact that every time you see anything with that much order, there was a mind behind it. Well, you'd probably argue that that's not true.
Well,
If you
well,
see a
it's so,
building,
yeah.
there's a builder. If you see a painting, there's a painter. Every single thing. This didn't pop into being. So when you see how much more order is in the human the body, like your eyebrows are there to keep sweat out of your eyes. Or the atheist position, they just so happen to keep sweat out of my eyes. That's not why they're there. Right? That's the stuff that you would have to say if you don't believe God made things. You would have to say that things just so happen to work this way. We just so happen to the mother, not the woman just so happens to give birth. That's she's not made to give birth because you don't believe anyone designed her to be that way. So all of the ways that our bodies work perfectly the way they do, and minus sickness and things, but um the way the order and structure of our bodies, you would have to say that it just so happened to work out that way. And that's just it takes a lot of that's it's hard to believe that. But I just feel like it's more of a common sense, like obvious thing. But obviously, I don't want to, use that argument because, you know, that can be kind of
Well,
fallacious, I
that's
guess.
exactly right. Well, yeah, that's exactly right. This is one of those debunked fallacies we know fails 100% of the time. Like it's the complexity argument. It's the intelligent design fallacy. Like we know 100% of the time this is a failure of human reasoning. It's an anthropocentric bias where we say we see complex things, we make things, therefore it must have been made by a mind. 100% fallacious. We know it fails. This is just like saying that um, appeals to authority fallacy. The priest says it's right, therefore it's true because the priest said it. We know it's 100% a failed
That's
argument. So
that's
this
it's
argument
no
that you
way.
presented
It's not even comparable.
was exactly comparable. This is literally a fact in every academic field. We've proven this wrong. This Google intelligent design. It's literally a pseudoscience. The
But you don't
first
see
line.
like a okay. If you see a
Well, no.
building,
Let me
yeah, my
explain
bad. You go
more in
ahead.
more detail. So there are lots of complex things we've seen all around the world. Like there's these cliffs that are just all hexagons, like lots of just hexagons everywhere. And people would think they were designed. 100% wrong. Not a design. It's a natural process. But we think it's designed because we have this bias that anything that's complex is designed. It's not the case. There are things far more complex than any human has ever made all over the universe, like electrons, like protein chains, like like chemistry based atoms that are far more complicated than anything humans have ever made. No one thinks these are designed. Christians don't think these are designed. This is just random processes that happen in chemical ponds
You
based
think
on amino
Christians
chain
don't think they're
acids.
designed?
Yeah, it's like this is something that just happens in a pool somewhere. It's not, I mean, like actual chemicals just forming together. It's not like God actually put his hand there. It's just something that happens naturally in a pool. Um, and so this is not this is a fallacy for humans to see something which they think is complex and attribute it to design based on nothing. It's not the
So
case.
why do you
Um,
think we do that? My bad. You go ahead.
oh, no,
I
it's
don't
totally fine. It's a evolutionary bias we have.
evolutionary bias.
Yep.
It has nothing to do with what we see in front of us today.
Nope.
The way that we see, like if you saw a building in the middle of the forest, you wouldn't assume that nature just caused this to be.
Well, so like if you see a tree, do you assume a human built the tree?
No, but
Why is that different? The tree is infinitely more complicated than the building. Why do you see a tree, which is infinitely more complicated than a building, and think, oh, human didn't design that?
a tree. I guess I'm trying to understand the argument a little better.
So trees are infinitely more complex than buildings, right?
Yeah,
But when you look at a tree, we don't see, oh, it's designed.
because that's the thing. I would say it's designed, but it's just a different way that you do it. It kind of sounds like I know that you're. It's like it is an argument, but it still sounds like it's not addressing the main point. Um,
Well, the
okay,
point is that the reason we can determine design of cars, of buildings, of computers is because we've seen humans make them. That's it. That's the only reason. There's no special quality in any of them that is the design quality. There's no complexity in any of them that requires a designer. There's nothing in them that requires a designer. What matters is that we've never seen a natural process that produces them. If there was a natural process that produces them, we wouldn't say they were designed. We'd say, oh, look, it's the thing that the natural process produces. And there are lots of very complicated things that come about by natural processes, like different chemical bonds. There are tons and tons of super complicated chemical bonds that are just like trees that happen naturally, they're not living objects, they're just chemicals. And we don't think they're designed because we see, oh, look, they're made in this pool. It's a really complicated thing made in this pool by a natural process. So natural processes can do things that are more complicated than anything humans do easily. But when we see things that have an emotional significance to us, like eyes that keep sweat out or whatever, we like to attribute that to intentionality because of something called a hyperactive agency detection bias, which is a result of evolution. So there's the fact that sweat keeps or eyes keep sweat, eyelids
eyebrows.
keep sweat out of your eyes, right? Isn't indicative design whatsoever. There's nothing about that indicates design. Nothing. Humans have a bias that will make them think it isn't indicative of design because of their hyperactive agency detection, but nothing about that indicates design. There's three possibilities. One, it's determined by prior existing physics. Two, it's random. Three, it's design. So it's the exact same question that we went to earlier when we look at the fine tuning of the universe.
When you say it's
There's three
determined, yeah,
possibilities. Yeah, like determined just means the physical forces created this with no possibility of an alternative.
sounds like it just is this way because it is this way.
Yeah, that's what determined is.
Okay, so it almost sounds like it's not determined by anything. It just well, okay, I think I get what you're saying.
It's like God's nature. It's just the way the universe is.
It sounds like a good explanation to me.
Well, so the two options are there's a God with consciousness and he has a nature, and there's a universe without consciousness and it has a nature. Both of them have a nature. Both of them determine everything.
It's tough to even, I'm really honestly trying to even understand the perception of how you can see like just a simple like, like a turtle that has a shell. It hides into the shell to protect itself. It's like it's just it's the way you're describing nature just sounds so godlike to me. Um
Well, I think that's your bias because you think everything must be God. You see God in everything, but try to imagine God. remove imagine God like killed his own consciousness or whatever. Just suicided. Just
I
God did
think
a suicide.
everything would go chaos though. It's like it's hard to even think of that.
Wait, what? So imagine. So God's killed himself, but his nature is still there. He's just like whatever essence of whatever made him is still there, right? So it's the stuff that makes him is still there. So he can still do everything. Still omnipotent. Still creates things just fine. But he's dead. There you go.
Yeah, that just the that's just impossible for me to even I honestly I feel like without the relationship you just have what is, and the God part just is a blank. So you say God of the gaps. So with the atheist, there's just nature and then the gaps. But then we fill the gaps in with God. Um, so I don't know how you get God out of those gaps. It's just that's very difficult to understand. There was another question I had that was related.
Well, the
It,
God of the gaps is an argument from ignorance. It's one of the ones I mentioned earlier. Wherever we don't have an answer, people say God did it. And you can just say anything did it. Leprechauns, a quantum field did it, force of nature did it. You can put anything you want in a gap. Gaps are evidence of nothing. And so what we want to look at is where there was a gap and we solved that gap. And if we can look at all the gaps that were there and what solved all of those gaps, the things that fit in those gaps and solved it are better explanations for the other gaps that we haven't solved yet. So, like laws of physics, quantum fields, these have solved gaps. They filled the gap and got it right and were proven to be correct. And so they now go on a shelf of like puzzle pieces that we can use for future gaps. God has never filled any of those gaps. Never made, like, just to be clear, to what I mean to fill a gap means you have a hypothesis and you say, if this hypothesis is true, here's a novel prediction about something we don't know yet in the universe, and we will discover it to be this if this is what is filling that gap. And then we discover it, and then you say, yep, that worked. And now that is something that legitimately fills a gap. Novel testable predictions is what fills gaps. And so for everything that can successfully make novel predictions and fill a gap, it goes on a shelf of things we can use for future gaps. We'll rationally use for future gaps. God is not on that shelf. Quantum fields are on that shelf. Laws of physics are on that shelf. Particles are on that shelf. Energy is on that shelf. God is not on that shelf. And so if you want to say what fills any gap that we don't know about yet, morality, dark energy, dark matter, origin of the universe, fine tuning, any gap, we can pick from that shelf that we have. And those are all rational conclusions because those are things we've demonstrated exist independent of our imagination. We're not allowed to put anything we want in that gap. We can't put leprechauns, no Santa, unicorns, magic, miracles. No. We are only allowed to pick from the shelf of things that have filled previous gaps successfully and made novel predictions. And this is the difference between a rational hypothesis and an irrational hypothesis. Now, you can justify trying to use other things like leprechaun, Santa, fairies in a number of ways, thousands of ways. And all of these ways are ways that we know are fallacious. There are tens of thousands of fallacies, biases, illusions, hallucinations, misconceptions, and we've labeled them. We have a big lists of them in philosophy textbooks to identify failures of human reasoning. We can't use these methods. The method we can use is novel testable prediction. That method works. That method is not fallacious. That method can accurately show us if something exists independent of our imagination. And that's why things that can do that go on the shelf of things that have been demonstrated to exist and that we can use for future gaps. All of the rationale that like theists are using, like the arguments for the fine tuning, which rests on this intuition of complexity, which that intuition has never made testable predictions. That intuition has failed every single time it's been applied. It's not on the shelf. It's not one of the puzzle pieces we can use because it fails. And we know it fails. It's one of the ones we put in the trash can because we know it fails. And so what we need is some kind of a new puzzle piece that you can use to demonstrate with novel testable predictions that this fills a gap and it works to give us new information about the universe we didn't know yet, to make it a legitimate piece of evidence. And atheists are like, you don't have that. You've never had that. This puzzle piece has failed every single time, and every gap it was filled by something else, never with a God particle. It never filled this gap. We should only use the pieces that have worked in the past, none of the new pieces. And that seems to be a more rational approach.
So I just don't see how you could ever come to the belief in a God if you're only using that system.
Well, so that system means you can take anything you want, leprechauns, God, fairies, unicorns, and say, if this fills gap X, then I can make a novel prediction about something we don't know yet in the universe and get it right. And if I do, that's evidence of leprechauns or God or fairies. And so this method allows for anything you can think of to fill a gap, but you need to confirm it with novel predictions. And then once you confirm it, then it goes on the shelf of pieces we can use to fill future gaps. And so it's totally okay with you indicating a God if the God hypothesis can make predictions about the future, about things we don't know yet, and get it right. Then it would be just as legitimate as anything in science, because that's what science requires of everything in the entire scientific field.
You say it has to make novel predictions about the future, but
Novel testable predictions.
novel novel testable predictions. What about the where the Bible says that the blood is with life is in the blood, and then they later found out that, well,
Well, that was something
they
they
could have
already knew.
figured that
So
out
that
back
was,
then.
yeah, that was something we knew before the Bible was written. If you stab somebody, the blood comes out, they die. So yeah, obviously loss of blood kills people. So life is in the blood. We knew that long before the Bible was written.
Yeah.
But like some examples would be the Revelations in the Old Testament says a guy's going to come down on a white winged horse, and the Christian population is going to, like, a large portion of them is going to disappear. And there's going to be like end times, all the end times predictions. Like there's a lot of predictions in the Revelations, which if those come true would be good evidence that Christianity was true. Or if, like, after we die and we go to heaven and we see God there, that's like, that would be great evidence. Like, yeah, that's a prediction of things we don't know yet. And so there are predictions in the Bible, and if they come true, that would be evidence of God for sure.
So I'm interested if those if you did see a man with eyes of fire and hair white like wool come down from heaven, from the sky, on a white horse, I mean, what would be your thought process?
That would
If
be
you saw that,
evidence.
that would be different than me seeing it, because I could have an illusion based on my bias or something, or delusion.
Well, the
It's more
difference
probable of,
between
yeah.
like a delusion versus a novel testable prediction. Novel testable predictions are future tense. So like if I, even though it could be a delusion that I'm seeing this guy on a winged horse or whatever, it's still evidence because it was predicted before I saw it. So if you like predicted God's going to come to you in a dream and tell you the next winning lottery numbers, and that happens, even if it was a delusion, that would still be evidence because you predicted it before it happened. So
Mm.
anything you predict before it happens is evidence, even if it's a delusion. So if you could predict delusions, and that would still be evidence.
So, I mean, like what? Okay, what would your mindset be if you saw that? If you saw that white winged horse come down from the sky, I mean, would that
I would,
contradict like reality, or would that be like, okay, well, it turns out God's real, but you know, like I don't know, just what would your mindset be on that? How would that? Yeah.
I would be, that's evidence of Christianity, and I would look for more evidence. Same thing I do with any belief.
So it wouldn't absolutely prove to you that God's real. It wouldn't absolutely prove to you
Well, you can't
that
prove anything with 100% certainty, but it's the more evidence you have, the more likely you are to believe something. So if there was one piece of evidence, um, then I would look for another and another. And then after I'd get a sufficient number of them, I would then believe the system, whatever it is.
system. Okay. It
But yeah,
sounds
usually,
like
usually takes more than one. So like if I just saw one thing is probably not enough for me to really believe anything. I'd probably need more confirming evidence. I don't know what the bar would be, but yes, like that would be evidence that would move me closer to believing that Christianity was true.
so. With that, you can definitely understand how Christians um, believe in God from their own personal experiences. Then, because those things have happened quite often for certain people in the Christian community. I mean, maybe
People
you
have
wouldn't know. I don't know.
seen a guy with fiery eyes come down from heaven.
No, like okay, like the Bible talks about if anyone's sick and you lay hands on them, what says their sin will be forgiven. But it talks about sin being related to healing. So I literally, recently I'm testing this stuff out. Um, I put my hands on someone's head and I just prayed, serious prayer, and their headache went away. And I don't know if there's some natural reason that could have happened, but it worked. And I was shocked because I was like, I am skeptical of that stuff sometimes. But the fact that I did it with my own hands and I just said, well, let me just, be serious about this for a second, just in case it works. And then it worked. So that kind
Oh
of
yeah,
blew my
absolutely.
mind.
So like 5,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, I can understand that being legitimately good evidence. So, like, if you put your hands on somebody's head and you say, be healed or whatever, and they are apparently cured of whatever they're suffering from, and you do it multiple times and it works multiple times, that would be a rational reason to believe in whatever you're praying to. Unfortunately, because today we have 100% explanations of naturally what causes that with even better evidence. Like we can show the psychological phenomenon of what's going on in the brain and the exact chemicals that are released that cause you to feel like you're healed. And we know that for what is called spontaneous remission, we know that that happens all around the world to all people with all diseases at a certain rate. So like cancer has a spontaneous remission rate of I think like 5% or something, where people just get healed. No treatment, they just heal. They just get healed. And so we can then test that to the amount of people who pray over someone with cancer and see if that rate changes. If it goes up, it goes down, whatever. And so we can prove that uh, the healing practices do not work. And they've been tested over and over and over again. The Templeton Foundation, massive Christian organization, has tested this many, many times. We know for a fact that this is a natural phenomenon in the brain caused by releasing dopamine, lowers cortisol, causes the immune system to activate faster simply because it makes you feel more comfortable. And we've replicated this in other ways, like we can show that in a hospital that's facing a garden, people will recover 20% faster than if it's facing a parking lot, because if you feel more comfortable, more at ease, it lowers your stress level will inhibit your immune system. And so, with your immune system working better, your body will recover faster. So, we know that this is a purely natural phenomenon in the body. We know it doesn't happen at a higher rate than chance. And so, for all of the healings, while it would be good evidence if you didn't have a background in science or philosophy or biology or all the different studies we've done in the field, now that we understand the process of what's actually going on, that gap has been filled by nature, and we can know what's causing it and how to reproduce it without God involved. Whereas if it only worked when you prayed for God, then yeah, that would be great evidence. Like if you pray to God to heal people's cancer, and that's the only time cancer gets healed, that'd be great evidence for sure.
It's interesting because it's not every person, but I've witnessed that myself. Uh, and then people coming back and saying, "Hey, the reports are good now." And me myself, I've had seizures, and I had seizures, and I constantly had seizures. And then when I was about 4, they all decided, you know what, let's pray for Ashley. Brought me to the altar to pray for me, and then I never had a seizure again. So things like that from my own personal experience. I have tried these things out and tested certain things, and certain things I felt like some people blew it out of proportion. But then other things I'm like, okay, well, this works and this works. And they prayed for me, and my seizures are gone somehow that day. That was the last. That was the last day. I didn't have any seizures after that. So it just kind of leads me in this direction even more to believe in God.
Well, so do you think your parents were praying for you to were praying to heal your seizures before that event? Probably like every day, every week.
Um, it's just that the Bible says if any of them are sick, bring them to the elders, and then that's what they did, and then it worked for some reason. But yeah, I would say that I would assume that they prayed for me before that.
Right. And how many people do you think get brought before the elders every year?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's not gonna be a every person thing. It takes a certain amount of faith, but I'm sure they brought which I don't like to use those arguments, but that's honestly what I believe it is. More of a okay, like a lack of faith, not God's timing, da da da. I know that's kind of
Well, let's
rhetoric, but
say there's a group of people who believe that touching a magical rabbit's foot will cure you of cancer, and they bring the magic rabbit's foot in front of 1,000 people. One of them, five of them, I think it's 50, 5% spontaneous remission rate. So a 5% spontaneous remission rate will be 50 people. 50 people will touch the magic rabbit's foot. And for them, it'll be the first time they've ever touched it. And they wake up the next week, cancer gone. Now, from their perspective, they're going to be like, that's pretty amazing. I touched this magic rabbit's foot and I was cured of cancer the next week. But they didn't look at the 950 other people who had no effect. And so, do very improbable things happen where you touch a magic lucky rabbit's foot and your cancer will be healed? Yeah, happens all the time, all over the world. Be the first time you touched it. And to you, that'll seem really, really amazing, really complex, really, really improbable. And you'll think, the lucky rabbit's foot is a real thing. Maybe. But when you actually look at the evidence, when you take the time to do the scientific due diligence and do the studies to see, well, does this work at a higher rate than chance? That's when you really can tell if it's something that exists in reality or if it's just coincidence. And when we do that, every single scientific study has shown doesn't work at any higher rate than chance. And so I can understand the power of the event happening to you. So like if I had cancer and I touched a lucky rabbit's foot and a week later I was cured of cancer, that would be a really emotionally profound experience for me, and I would want to trust that the lucky rabbit's foot was really magical. But science doesn't allow us to have those personal feelings as a way to account for evidence. It's not evidence. We know it's not evidence because we know we're biased and we know that we can use our emotions to try to lead us one way or the other. And what we need is that impartial analysis of the evidence to say, is this really a thing? Do lucky rabbit's foots actually cure cancer? Or was it random chance and I just felt special? And when every time we do those studies, it's never the case that prayer heals. It's always the case that the people who happened to get a spontaneous remission felt special and then attributed truth to this thing that made them feel special. And the percent chances of you actually healing from it are no different than picking your nose, eating a jelly donut, scratching your butt, or anything else because it's pure random chance.
that's why I would say that the evidence can only when you said 0%, like that's
Well, it is
crazy to me.
0%. So, like, if you touch a rabbit's foot and your cancer is healed, that's 0% evidence that the rabbit's foot actually causes healing, because we have this greater body of evidence that the scientific community has assessed to show that the lucky rabbit's foot doesn't increase your chance of healing more than random chance, which means it's zero evidence. Your personal experience is zero evidence because we have the greater body of evidence to know how much that actually sways the data one way or the other. So for it to be evidence, it has to be more than random chance. If it's no more than random chance, it's zero evidence.
But there's so many variables that could apply there, like witnesses, and I mean, it could have been certain procedures, like certain people's mindsets towards the thing, and it could be one of those things where it's just got to be done the right way. So
Well,
to
yeah,
say it's
that's
zero
totally true.
percent,
Well, you're absolutely right that there could be some kind of special ritual you need to do to get it to work, but no one's found it. No one has ever found it.
except for
Every
the people
ritual,
that say they believe in God, except for
no,
those,
they
well, I
they
say
haven't
some of those
found it
people.
either. No one's found it. So if you find the special ritual that works and you publish a
I got
paper to
it.
show this is,
I
well,
got
do
the
it.
special ritual. If
Do it.
everybody does this, they'll find it.
Go to a child cancer wing, get them to do the ritual,
Well, okay,
and
I'm
you
not talking
heal
about healing,
everyone
but
there. Like this is what I mean by the ritual. You got to find the ritual, you got to publish it in a paper, and you got to be able to take it to any hospital in the world. And if they do the ritual, they'll have a higher recovery rate than chance. And if you do that, you now have the better evidence than God than anyone has ever presented in the history of humanity.
okay. The ritual is to believe in God, and I mean not believe in God, like 'cause that's kind of a stretch. The rich You're losing your mind over there,
You
man.
don't even need to tell me the ritual. Go to a child hospital wing, start curing people, and I will believe you.
Okay, okay. Well, we've healed some people already. Obviously, it takes them to be a part of the ritual, but you know, it's it's uh it's a little more of a complex thing. But yeah, just I can't just, hey, I'm gonna do step A and B because then they've got to do some steps as well, and then yeah, but that's another thing. I was talking about the belief in God. Um, but yeah, that's true too.
All you got to do is go to a hospital, get people to do it, and start healing people at a higher rate than chance. No one's ever been able to do it. No Christians have ever been able to
No
do it.
one has ever been able to do
Nope. If they
it.
had, we would be super, super impressed.
There's
So,
no, but they don't.
so the rate at which Christians get healed is the exact same as the rate at which Hindus get healed. So if we
Yeah,
go to a,
but
well, think about it this way. If one of every million Christians was a true Christian, then the rate of healing in Christian hospitals would be higher than the rate of healing in Hindus, because zero Hindus are genuinely believing Christian or genuinely believe in Jesus, right? They believe in Hinduism, many gods, polytheism, which means if there is a single Christian out of every million Christians, and there are 2 billion something Christians, then the rate of healing in Christian hospitals would be higher than the rate of healing in Hindu hospitals. But it's not. The rate of remission for cancer is the same, identical. And so if your model was correct that there were some Christians who needed to believe genuinely and do the prayer thing genuinely, then it would be higher necessarily. The healing rate would be higher on the Christian side than the Hindu side, or the Muslim side, or the Sikh side, or the Jain side, but it's not. The rate of remission for cancer is the same everywhere in the world. Doesn't matter what religion you are.
well, I don't I don't think that that's true. I don't think they would have to be the same. I don't think that they would have to be different because if they apply the same, it's all about if they apply the same model that the Bible gives for the healing.
Well, the belief in Jesus part is a clear difference between the Hindus and the Christians there. So if they just
It's a
don't believe in
difference.
Jesus,
It's a difference, but God, He reigns on the just and the unjust. I mean, so He's not going to just what you reap, you will sow. So depending on,
so you don't need to believe in Jesus to get healed.
no, 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 you don't.
Okay. And you don't need to get prayed over to get healed.
I prayer takes on
Because this
different
is the same
forms.
rate among atheists. So atheists who have no prayer, no one's praying for them, same rate of recovery.
Yeah, okay. Mm, Getting healed, atheists getting
Yep.
healed.
Yeah. Spontaneous remission of cancer is the same among every single group: atheist, Christian, Hindu, Eskimo, potato person, everybody.
I don't believe in potato persons, but that's another discussion. um, you say it's the same. Okay, okay, same rate with a
Yep.
minority of atheists. It's the same rate.
Yeah. So it's cancer has a 5% remission rate. That means of every 100 people, 5 people get cured. So if there's 100 atheists and 100 Christians, 5 people. If there's a 10,000 Christians, it'll be 50 people or 500 people. So the rate is what's evidence is the rate, not the literal number. The literal number doesn't matter. What matters is the rate. How often do people get cured of cancer without doing whatever? And it's 5%.
Okay, so trying to get the math right. If it's the same rate, 5%, I don't even know. Same. Okay, I got you. I got you.
They're called Irish, the potato people.
They say Irish.
Uh,
That's so stupid. um, drawing a blanket. What I was gonna say, but maybe it'll come up later. Yeah, because yeah, but I don't think you have to believe in God for a healing to take place. But I mean, a healing by definition doesn't sound like, well, I guess if your body is healing itself, then that would be a healing.
yeah.
Okay.
And the question was about the ritual. You said there's some ritual you have to do. And if atheists are getting healed at the same rate as Hindus, at the same rate of Christians, at the same rate of Eskimos, and atheists don't do any of the rituals other than go to the hospital, then it seems like there is no such ritual. So what you need to do is to have this ritual, apply it to a group of Christians, which are not done by atheists. That would be the control group. The control group are people who do not do the ritual, and show that it has a higher rate of healing than the people who do not do it. And that there it does not exist. Well, I mean, it does. It's called medicine. You go to a doctor and they give you medicine that works at a higher rate than doing nothing. But no ritual for prayer has ever worked.
I didn't say that the ritual was for healing. The ritual was for knowing that God exists. But I would just thought that what you said about healing was interesting. So that no one has ever done this, and I mean, because if I go to a hospital and I pray for someone, and then you know their body's healed, and I see that personally, um, I mean, yeah, there could be a higher rate of it not working. But I haven't experienced a lot of that. I just know that I have prayed for this lady one time, and she said that she could not see, and then she began, not like blind forever as some sickness, um and then she began to be able to see more. Wasn't like perfect vision. um and then I just pray. So I haven't had a ton of experience with healings and stuff. I just briefly touched on some of mine. I just want to know your thoughts on it. But I would say the ritual for knowing that God is real, I don't think that it's like you're not gonna find it out unless you get unless you open your mind up to a type of, I just say like an anime type of worldview. Like if you open
Well,
your
I'm
mind
open
up
to
to
anime.
more
Like I'm very anime open. So
like
again, I
real
think this
life
is
though, like anime is fake, right?
no, Naruto is real, no lie.
Well, you're right. You're right. That's my favorite. But we'll
But again, this goes
definitely.
back to the very beginning of our conversation, where all the studies show atheists were more open and more willing to do the work and more wanting the relationship than Christians do. It did not work.
I just don't believe that. But because
I know
okay,
most Christians can't. It's
where do
like a
you
defense mechanism.
where do you get this from? Because if an atheist says like, "Dude, I tried, it doesn't work," like I could see anybody saying that. That just doesn't make sense. Like I was on the verge of like, you know what? I don't know if this stuff is real. I think the difference maybe was because I wanted it to. Well, they probably wanted it to be real. I don't know. That's just weird. That
That they were believers. They wanted it to be real. They believed it was real, and they researched as hard as they could the Bible, the manuscripts, the philosophical arguments. They know more. Atheists know more about the Bible and know more about religiosity than religious people do because they were so invested in it. And a good indication of this is the fact that the higher up academically you go, the more atheists there are.
But that's like a new thing because back then those people were not atheists. The scientists that everyone looked towards, they weren't atheists. They believed in some higher power. So that's like a new thing, like a today's thing.
Uh, no, it was always the case. Like it was obviously there were more religious people back then because it was literally illegal to be an atheist and you were killed for it and imprisoned for it. But even back then, the higher up academically you go, there are more atheists than the average people at the time period. So it's always been the case that the higher academically you go, the more atheists there are.
I'm talking
It's not
about the
more
leaders
prevalent
in
now.
the science community.
Yeah, like
You're,
Galileo.
you're saying they were atheists?
Yeah, there was always more atheists the higher up you go. Like, I don't mean like the majority was always atheists in the academic community. I mean, the higher in the academic community you go, the rate of atheism was higher than the general public. And so even back then when it was literally illegal to be an atheist, there were more atheists at the high levels of academia than there were among the common people.
But every scientist that people know about, they all had statements of believing in some type of supernatural being.
No.
No?
Socrates, have you heard of that guy? Not religious. Plato, like
Plato? I've seen I have to research
you
this
know, he
again
believed in
because
forms. He believed in the perfect forms, platonic forms. But yeah, so obviously there were less atheists in the past, but again, that's because it was literally illegal. You were killed for it. Socrates was killed for being an atheist. He was charged with the crime of atheism and put to death.
Mm.
But I do have to go pretty soon. I have a thing at I'm going biking.
Okay. Did you want to stop at like 10?
Sooner
Or
would be better, like in like 3 minutes, because I gotta get ready and start biking to get there.
okay, I got you. Well, I think there was just one question I wanted to ask you. Okay, yeah. I want to get into I say the main point. The main point was the whole discussion. But my I guess I can just kind of close out what I was my point is I believe that if you are if you doubt God's existence and you don't experience that relationship with him yourself or even try to, or even if you're not kind of if you don't get a little crazy for that experience, then you're not going to know. And I think it's a big risk to take to not go 120% for a certain moment of your life to find that out, because what you're going to end up with is relying on systems to, in a sense, be your god, and whichever system works best for most people. And then what's going to happen is you're going to get to a point where you're going to doubt your own existence, and you're not going to know for sure. You're just going to have to say, well, I choose to believe that I'm real, but I don't know for sure. And just like this conversation here, you could be so skeptical to not even know if this conversation is going on right now. And I don't know where your position is, but I'm just saying, like, there's no way you could prove these things that are so obvious. And that's what I think God would be. Obviously, we don't have a lot of time to go in deeper to that, but that's just my conclusion. So you can give yours, and then we can wrap it up or whatever.
I think you can be as certain or more justified in any belief without a God as you can with a God. You don't need a God for anything.
Like T Jump, I definitely see us having more conversations in the future. Probably schedule something with my boy because he'll probably be a little more aggressive than me. Um, but I appreciate you coming on, man, and God bless you, brother. If even if you don't believe in God, I still you know, that means a lot for for somebody to say that, even if you don't believe in it. So just take it as respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me on. Really appreciate it. Always a pleasure talking to you and look forward to talking to you in the future.
Yes, sir. Hope you have a good day, man.
You too.
Enjoy
Talk
your biking,
talk
bro.
to you later. For sure. All right. I'm gonna go run to the bathroom. See you later.
So, guys, um, let's get some conversation going. I tell you, it's kind of difficult to get to the. Hold on a second. It's super dark, man. Oh, yeah. it's kind of it's kind of difficult to assess the mindset of people, man, because I wanted to get more into that because I really think that when you start doubting things like God's existence, um I mean I've doubted it in my past, but once you start like doing that and you can't open your mind up to it at all, I'm not saying that he's not open, but it's like no amount of proof can show you. Even when we brought up the fine tuning of the universe, I see it's like a different mindset. It's like when we talk about fine tuning, we're talking about when we talk about fine tuning, it's like it just keeps going back to that. Well, it had to be from God because there's no way this complex order could exist without some mind causing this. And he's like, well, we have evidence that it just happened this way anyways. Without you don't need a God. But it's like it's hard to even understand like without a God that this could still possibly happen. I don't know. I'm trying to be understanding of his position, but it's very hard to step into that mindset of not believing in God when you can the fact that you can feel things like purpose, the fact that they're just kind of not only do you just feel purpose, but it's so strong that you feel it in every fiber of your being that there's something I'm supposed to do. It's like the voice of God. And I feel like it's just so easy to deny that because God did not make it obvious. I mean, he made it obvious, but not to it's weird the way I'm even wording this. But God made it so obvious that he's real that if you deny his existence, then it's very close to just denying like objective morality, or it's very close to like denying um it's very close to denying that you even exist. Like how if you can't say that God exists, then you could come up with reasons why you don't even exist. And sounds like I'm preaching to the choir. I don't want to sound like I'm like bashing the guy's mindset or anything after the live, but it's like the more you dig into this, I could bring up all the arguments and it still wouldn't make a difference. It's are you willing to, hey, let me try out my local church. Let me just it's almost like let me pretend that God is real for a second, right? And then you do that and you find out, oh man, I actually feel something here that I like. Like that's where it starts. And then your evidence starts lining like, oh, the fine tuning. Oh, I see why. But that's an experience that takes more of a humbling approach because it can be kind of weird sometimes. Going up to the altar and having people lay their hands on you and pray for you, and saying that this God is going to heal you of your stress and anxiety and push you through life. It's like because it's like so slow, it's kind of like working out. That's why it's hard to see the instant um, progress in it. But you eventually get to a place. So we could be in the matrix, we could be brains in a vat, but so far we assume we're real. That's my point. That's my point. Um, so if T Jump is not real, who were you just talking? No, 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 no. I know that I'm real. I'm saying that without a God, you begin to have without a God, you begin to get skeptic of things. I mean, you could just pick where you want to be and just say, you know what, I know I'm real, and not even think too much about it. But once you go towards evidence, there are people that go so far as to say that there's an interesting form of nothing. We're all nothing. And I've heard this so much that this is where a lot of this evidence goes. I know T Jump. He says a lot of things like so he actually aligns more with me than most atheists. I'm not saying that he aligns with me because he doesn't believe in God, so that's a big difference. But what I'm saying is T Jump actually believes in objective morality, which I don't know how he can prove that that is a real thing. And I know he says it's a contradiction without if there's a God, because that I would say, okay, it uh, morality would be subject to God. If God created everything, then he is the one that created the system. He's the one that made the world work this way that it did. So therefore, objective morality would be dependent upon him. He is the I would say he is the ultimate object. Um, he is more than just a floating dude with a gray beard in the sky. He is a sort of element. It's like if that's what I'm saying. Like, how could you possibly find objective morality without some person? If a person laid out the world and told you, "Hey, this is right, this is wrong, this is right, this is wrong." Well, no, 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 he hasn't. He just said it's possible. I just don't think, but he said it was possible. I just don't see how it could even be possible to, but I guess we don't know. That's what it ends up being. It's like with a Christian or a believer, we say, well, God is the only reasonable explanation for this gap. Therefore, I'm going to at least, if I'm unsure, I'm at least going to lean in the direction of believing God while I'm waiting on the other evidence that's unknown. See, a God, it does. You can't say that a God doesn't make sense or it couldn't work. You can say that we're assuming God. I wish I brought this up, but it was so much that was he he goes through a lot of things that I try to assess and understand because he's an atheist. I try to not jump in and argue at the wrong point. I want to understand him. But what I would have said was the difference between the atheist and the believer is that the believer says, okay, even if we're assuming that God is real, it's more probable it's more probable than an unknown thing. Because an unknown thing, there's no evidence for something that's unknown because that unknown thing is not we don't know what that is yet. So why would we believe something that's unknown that we don't know about versus all right, cool. Everybody's talking about this God. There are witnesses of this God doing things, and there's obviously other religions, but we have more historical data on our side, I would say. Some may disagree, but I would say it's objective morality could just be an undiscoverable particle. That is his hypothesis. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like it's unknown. Like your best explanation is something that is unknown. Unknown to me or undiscovered sounds like nothing yet. It's some particle could have caused all of this to come to existence. But how can you get that particle from nothing. You know what's so funny? The conversation was at first titled Cosmological Argument, and we didn't even touch on that. I don't know what this conversation was supposed to be titled, 'cause I just titled it "Does God exist?" Because I didn't know like how it was gonna go, because I just had certain questions. I just wanted to dig in more, because some of the stuff he was saying, I was like, I don't know how you could even think that way. Because I was not I've never been determined to think that way. I know I'm using the word wrong, but I've just never thought that way. It just sounds very interesting to think this way. And I really it's impossible for me though, because I've had a relationship with God. God has literally said things to me. He has said things to me, and to consider it, I can't possibly, as soon as I go into, yeah, well, maybe God's not real. It's like it's impossible for me to even consider it, not because I don't want to. Sometimes we have to believe in undiscovered things like dark matter until we come up with a better idea. A better idea. Like, is God not a better idea? Is God like a terrible idea? Because God could be possible. I mean, for God to contradict nature, that doesn't matter, obviously, because God is outside of nature. So it's very strange when maybe you are just having a conversation with yourself. Well, I'm actually talking to Tim West right now. So that's who I'm having a conversation with. But maybe there's some alternate universe where Tim West is me, my doppelganger, and commenting. Is that what you're saying? Am I taking it too deep? So yeah, I thought the conversation was interesting. Yes, God could be possible. Okay, I like to capitalize my G. You know what I'm saying? But I'm gonna put that on the shirt. I like to capitalize my G, because that's my God. But yeah, if the I think that's the ontological argument. The ontological argument, I don't quite understand it. I just started looking into it, but I think that's kind of what that touches on. The fact that God could be possible. I do think he's the best explanation. I would say he's the best explanation. I'm stepping out of my what I know. Like, I know God's real. So I don't want anybody to think for a second that I'm doubting the existence of God. Like, I've experienced God like it more real than I have experienced my own mother. I've experienced God like 100 times more. But I'm just kind of entertaining this for, because maybe somebody was moved and they want to say, hey, well, let me just see if this God is real. And you're not going to see if God is real. You can look into the evidence, but the evidence more so, as much evidence out there that's out there is more icing on the cake. And the fact that he says it's 0%, I'm like, yo, I have never heard something like that in my life. The 0% thing is just crazy to me. You were saying you have a conversation with God. Maybe you were just having a conversation. Oh, um, that's the thing. Unless there are some hidden knowledge pockets that just open up when I start getting into um getting into emotion, if there's some hidden knowledge or hidden information in my brain that just pops in there, that doesn't make sense to me, that I could be just having a conversation with myself. Um, because I was literally just sitting on my bed, just like, God, I need to know if you're real. This is before I'm even researching anything. And it was just like, he just kind of put these images in my head. And then I felt this tingling sensation all over my body. I could feel a connection. Kind of like, um, I felt like, it's almost like, I'll say this. It's almost like you see God with your heart. It's like you see God. That's just so weird. It's like you don't see him with your eyes. And that's what makes it hard for other people to believe. Like there are natural things that you feel. It's like I get it. Ex- there's a scientific explanation behind everything. But the thing is, that's because God made the science. God made those things, but just us existing without someone wanting us to exist, without someone wanting us to have this conversation, that's wild. To believe something like that. That's all I can say is that it's very wild to believe like every single story that is ever made, the characters have purposes. The characters were created to do this thing. It's like everything we've always had this understanding for us to just randomly by physics exist and get so good at things and to just move the way we do without any order, without any designer, without anyone at the top, orchestrating any of this. Like, yes, what consciousness is still an open question in science. It is hard to define and hard to know where it comes from. I think it's easy. Consciousness is just on a spectrum. I feel like if a sincere atheist prays to, even if he was being honest and he just didn't know which God to pray to, and he just said, God, whoever is up there, please show yourself to me. I'm sincerely asking. I don't want to be wrong in my assessment that you are not real. If you actually are, please show yourself to me. If you're not real, then if an atheist is willing to do that consistently, then I still know God's real, right? But I would begin to rethink the procedure that it takes to believe in God. But a lot of atheists kind of like, yo, God, show me you're real. Whatever. He's not showing me. And I've had those moments. I'm like, God, yeah, do you speak to people? Like, are people all tripping? Like, I've had those thoughts. I still today do. Because God doesn't, that's the thing about me that people don't understand. God, I don't have visions and visitations, and God doesn't have an audible voice in my ear. I don't hear those things. Those things don't happen to me. Um, I don't see limbs like fingers grow back and things like that. It's just so I have a totally different experience than most Christians I know. It's always some magical element. I say magical loosely. There's always some supernatural element that exists in their lives that, oh man, this thing happened. I traveled. I had this visitation that brought me here, and I saw what this person was like. I think if God is real, He may not want some people to believe in God. Only certain people. I that is very true, um, especially based on what the Bible says, um, that you have to have a love for the truth. Well, but this is the thing. I didn't bring it up, but I asked T Jump the last conversation. I said, "Do you have a craziness for truth?" And he said, "No, I more so have a craziness for happiness." I think that's the crux of the difference, because I'm willing to do some different, you know, not stupid, weird, but just weird, kind of awkward things to see if God is real. Because I know it's not based on just evidence. Evidence, I would say, is the icing on the cake. If you found out that God was real, then all that evidence would be like, oh man, this really lines up now. If you knew that, if God said, hey, I am real, and He put it in your heart that He is real, then all that evidence would line up. It's like, oh, I get it. Now I see why they say fine tune. Like, had to be someone because He is orchestrating, da da da. Like, for you to not believe in God, you obviously like have no problem with believing that things could randomly happen. You have no problem believing that. I have a big problem because it's just natural, because that's the way that your worldview is. So random things just coming into so much order, it's fine for you. You have no problem with that. I have a big problem with that. But for me to go in and prove it would almost be like proving that you see me wearing a black shirt. Because you may say, well, we don't know if that I've actually had people tell me, like, how do we know that black is actually black? That if we named it something else, it would be something else. I'm like, no, bro, it is what it is, no matter what you name it. So I've had people argue this, and it's, but yeah, I don't think I would argue that most atheists anti-jump is too smart for his own good. And I know I hate when people say that to me. Like you've always got a rebuttal for something, right? So I'm just saying that he leans more towards evidence when he should be, in my opinion. Well, this is what I know for facts. This is what worked for me and works for a lot of people. And I know he wants to base it on, well, statistically, this hasn't worked. So I'm not going to try this out. Yeah, but if it works for 5 people out of those 50, then that's pretty good indication that it's possible. It's at least possible that there are certain instances where that magic bunny or whatever you brought up caused that healing to happen. So if I heard 5 people touch the magic rabbit, I mean, obviously I don't believe in magic rabbits, but I would believe in that before I would believe in nothing bringing about this universe. But we didn't even touch on the cosmological argument. I think that's such a powerful argument. But yeah, if we believed in some, if someone told me, hey dude, there were 50 people, there were 5,000 people that touched this thing, that touched the Bible, let's say, and it healed their sickness, and 5 people, no, 5,000 that didn't work, 5 people that did work. I'll say, well, let me just touch it to see. Especially if it's something that I don't have to go a long trip to go find, and I can just do it in the comfort of my own home. I'm gonna get a Bible. I'm pretty sure like a lot of atheists have Bibles, but I'm gonna read it, meditate on it. I'm gonna give it a chance. Like I'm going to lean into it. And when I say lean into it, I'm gonna say, let me like choose to assume that this is real for a second. Let me entertain this being real for a second. Let me actually, for myself, I don't care about other people what they did because we don't know the mindset behind those people. But let me jump in and actually entertain this. Let me go to a church and praise and worship and lift my hands up to this what I think is an imaginary being. But let me give it a chance to say, hey, maybe this is real. Maybe let's actually entertain the idea of, you know what? Let me give this a chance. Let me give my emotion to this environment. And, some may think if you do that, you'll be brainwashed. But I don't think that's the case. I think if you're an atheist and God is not real, then you would come out just saying, well, I did it and it didn't work. But if you actually did that, that was kind of the crux of my argument that if you actually went to a church, not even the church thing. You can just go to somebody, "Hey, bro, I'm really struggling. I need prayer. I need you to pray for me." Like when a hard, difficult time comes and you don't know who to turn to, ask somebody to pray for you. Somebody that's really a Christian that, like me, not saying that I'm just some great Christian. I'm just saying how much I believe in it. But like me, if you're going through a really tough struggle and you say, "Hey, I just want to see if this works because I don't know what else to do." In those moments, test it out with someone that is a believer and really dig in and assume that God's real for a second and entertain the idea. And I believe that you'll come out believing in God. But that's all I have today. I'm just going to read these last few comments. I think most atheists value truth over feeling good, happiness, but T Jump is an exception. Um, Search crazy audio illusion. What do you hear? We could actually experience it be changed based on our bias. I'll look at that real quick. Let's see what this is. Um, let's see. You said search crazy audio illusion. I don't know what your point of this would be exactly. Is it like is it this short? Or is it just random videos that, some of them are, is it like ASAP Science or Four Weird Audio Illusions? It's got 2 million views. Maybe it's this one. Let's see if I can do my reaction video. Whoops. I did that wrong. Well, let me see if I can just move myself over. The short. Okay. Well, I'm just gonna do. Where's my reaction at? Perfect. Perfect. That'll work fine. I was like, I know I got a doggone. Which one is it? Window capture. All right. Let's see here. I'm guessing it's this one right here.
You can't trust your ears. This video has no sound, but some people say they hear a thumping every time the elephant hits the seesaw. Can you hear it? Let me know. If you can't hear it, share it with a friend to see if they can. You can't trust your ears. This video has no sound, but some people say they hear a thumping every time the elephant.
I still could kind of hear that thumping, like with my brain, but I kind of wanted the video without this one. Okay.
If you listen to this audio and you listen for the word brainstorm, you hear brainstorm. But if you listen to it again, but this time listen for the words green needle, then you hear the other one.
What's remarkable about that, it's not just like hearing brainstorm and then hearing something like shame's form, green needle.
It's
you
like,
write the words down, they look entirely different.
This demonstrates that our expectations shape how we view the world. And to me, I think this must have huge implications for worldview. If you expect to find evidence everywhere abounding that God exists, then you'll find it.
Yeah.
If you expect the world to be a pessimistic place full of suffering and misery, then that's what you find. Surely this can explain a lot about people's political and religious dogmatism. You meet somebody else and you just don't understand how they see the world that way. How can you possibly think this is how the world works? It's because that's what we've been taught to expect. If you listen to this audio and you listen for the word brainstorm,
I will say I like the way that it's crazy. People don't get so mad that I like these atheists. I don't, I like the way that he views that. That is a very true thing that he said. It definitely is. And yes, when you view the world, you should try the one. Okay, that was the brainstorm one. Just that one, right? The brainstorm green needle. Because yeah, I've seen that before. I've heard Laurel Yanny or something like that too. The difference is, I'll say, for one, that video is a more of an optical illusion ear thing, science type of difference or whatever. But I do think it does hold value in the real world. It is true. It's a little different, but it does bring up a good point, and that point is true. That the way that people want to see the world is what they will see. So if you don't, but that's why I strongly advise people to, like, when people converse with you and they have an argument and they talk to you, not to say, hey, well, I have a better relationship with this person so that they're right, and to kind of lean in that direction because you have a natural way of looking at this person. But I just don't believe that if I'm open and I was like, God, and you're right, I wanted God to be real because I could not live in a world where it doesn't, okay, obviously it doesn't make sense to me, right? But I couldn't live in a world where we just ended. It's like it doesn't even make sense to me. But if I consider that this world just came to be about, which just, it's like, yo, am I that brainwashed that I just believe in God? And I mean, obviously I know that God's real, but I'm just saying, like, could I possibly be that brainwashed into just believing that this God caused these elements to exist for us to have this conversation? Is just phenomenal, man. And to say that God, there's no mind that was before ours. The first mind was Adam, or some ape or whatever someone believes, some tadpole. That was the first mind that came to be about. The first mind, the fact that we could even consider things, like, to believe that we are having conversation right now and no one brought that about. Not even the supernatural, like, oh, someone's looking down on our conversation, but just not even to, like, the fact that those two views are so talked about is very interesting. And you don't even want to, like, how heavily would you consider that, is what I'm saying. Like, you would just really lean towards, well, we don't have evidence, da da da. But it's like, no, 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 no. Just really think about that, though. Like, we have two conversations going on. There's no God, there is a God. Like, that's that's vastly different from hearing two different sounds. Like, your perception is completely avoiding a God existing. I could understand the person that says, I kind of don't think God's real, but he really could be. Like, that type of person, I'd be like, that's honest. That guy's honest. But to say, like, there's no reason to believe in God, that's whatever. It's like, that mind frame is just, it blows my mind when people just say, like, well, there's no evidence, you know what I mean? So, it's whatever. Who cares? Like, not even like, yo, eternally living forever. You don't want to, like, get outside of your research to figure that out. Let me pray, like, kind of consistently with a little emotion to see if something reaches out to me. Like, that's what I was thinking. There's no way I'm gonna, like, miss that chance and be wrong about this. I'm gonna be a little crazy to figure this out. Bump my happiness, and I know that you say that T-Jump is an exception, but it's wild to say that. Um, I wanted to get into as well, but I'm not gonna, like, bring it up a lot. But he did say something about, God drowns babies, so therefore I don't believe in God. Not that that's the reason, but he said something about, God, the flood. But obviously that's kind of I have an answer for it, but I don't want to go so far into it because he's not here to argue his point. But I'm just saying that I do believe that more atheists have more emotional reasons not to consider it. Not that he's just like, oh, I'm just doubting the existence of God because of that. Like, I think the evidence does hold weight to him because of his view. And he's kind of like, why do Christians just assume there's a God? Right? But we assume there's a God until I'm saying, like, analytical Christians, I'll say. Analytical Christians assume there's a God until they feel some type of experience with God, and then they know. But people that just are more spiritual, I say, or more, we just believed it since we grew up, those people don't have a problem. They just believe God. That's great. I wasn't privileged to have that mindset. I have a mindset where I had to worry about, am I just gonna cease to exist? That sounds terrible, by the way, to cease to exist in your mind. All this just seems very meaningless if we just exist and then we're nothing. Like, bump life, bro, if that's the case. Because us existing forever sounds way better and I'm not just believing it because it sounds better, but to not want to find out, that's my whole point of bringing it up, not to even want to find out that um that there's a God, like, sincerely with all of your heart. Like, yo, God, I'm tearing up right now. If you're real, please show yourself to me. Please, God. Like, it just sounds like most atheists to me don't really have a care for it. Like, not, he didn't sound like he was like, that sounds like it could. It's just like he was just like he didn't. And I don't have a problem with him. I'm just saying this is my view. It just seemed like, and I'm sure he probably thinks like, dude, you're just assuming God in every single instance. It's like, I'm just concerned as to why you're not considering that God could be that reason. Like, not even a consideration, like 0%. Like, what? If he came down with the white horse, would all that past evidence still be 0%? You'd be like, well, man, I don't know. Let me line the rest of this stuff up then with what he said. Now, let me line up this fine tuning and stuff with this. Like, let me see, what was your experience like before you were born? Do you remember? No, I don't remember. I don't think my consciousness happened when I was probably like 4. Uh T Jump doesn't think God doesn't exist because of the flood. He thinks God would not be moral because of the flood. Big difference. Oh, no. I know it. I know what he's saying. Um that's why I didn't want to get too into that, because I didn't want to try to argue a point that he's not here to defend. Um because I don't want to take him out of context. But I do believe that I just don't think we can describe morals without a God. We can have morals, but to say that God is evil, like, you'll have to just use some made up system by man that most people agree with. Like, I don't think you can, and I'm sure he would have something to say to this. That's why I didn't really want to get too into it. But I was just making the point that, he ties his evidence, he can tie his evidence up with that, and that is some type of um emotional reason, because I would say there's no logic behind God being moral for doing that. It does sound bad. Um, how would you live your life differently if you discovered there was no God, or you someday didn't believe in a God? I feel like I would be depressed, but I wouldn't do any. I know some people say, well, if I found out there wasn't a God, I would grape and I would steal and I don't believe that's true for most people, because there are natural things that we experience today. We just feel bad doing those things for whatever reason. If it's not God, then it's just an unknown. So no, I don't think I would live my life complete. Well, no, I probably would. I would do a lot of different things. I would stop going to church. I would probably be with multiple women. Um, yeah, I probably would just. I would be less moral if I found out that God was not real. I wouldn't be like completely immoral, because that wouldn't satisfy me. But I would lean towards all of my satisfactions. I would drink, I would smoke. The reason why? Because I don't care about what happens to me. Like, when I die at that moment, if there's no heaven, if there's no God, everything is more meaningless. I would not take as much care of myself, because us not existing for eternity, I don't take too well to teases. So this whole life would just be a tease. T Jump was a believer in God into his teens, so he did consider it. I think most people believed in God when they were younger. That was my point. If you would be depressed, you should continue to believe in God. I do appreciate your honest conversation, Tim West. I think that you know it's good to have conversation with people that disagree. As long as we're not like, we can even get a little like, nah, bro, that's crazy. What you talking about? We could do that too. As long as we're not like bashing people, because because me bashing somebody doesn't make sense. But I will like I don't know, like me and T Jump, we weren't really like arguing, but we had certain moments where we're like, wait a minute, what? Just as long as like I was like making sure like that he didn't feel ridiculed by what I was saying, because that's not my point. Because, you know, I care about the dude. And I don't think he's stupid. I just think there's like a certain, I just feel like he has yet to go to that amusement park where he feels like, yo, this amusement park was so amazing. I want to go to this all the time. You know what I mean? Like, I just feel like all of the bad just outweighs it for him. So he probably doesn't have any real reason to consider it in an anime type stuff. I love that this dude said, I'm about to say the sucker. I love that. I love, this is how I talk. Sorry. I love that this guy said Naruto was his favorite. Well, he didn't say, he said Naruto is real. And I agree with you, bro. That's one thing that we came out of agreeing on. Naruto is very real. That is my favorite anime. If you have a better anime, I'm not even mad at you for saying that another anime is better. But just send it to me. I will watch it. And I want to know, because I have been looking to recreate that experience again. So I will be happy to put Naruto second to some other anime. I skip the fillers too, so I don't count the fillers. But yeah, we'll have to get on here and talk about some anime stuff eventually. But I'm trying to get into this community, man, so I can talk to these people. That would be so awesome. I would love to be a part of that, just to do this every day. It's part of my life. But guys, like I said, man, please like the video. So we could talk to more people, so we can get this conversation going. I'm trying to just have a good time and talk to people, man. I'm not gonna lie. I love talking. And also subscribe if you're feeling it. And God bless you guys. I'm out.